AT&T Wi-Fi, so that's what I was going to suggest. So you beat me to it.
I'll do
So AT&T Wi-Fi, hopefully it handles this many people. But we actually have an app you're going to download later in order to try something with this funky thing you have on your table there, these merge queues. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to the human side of virtual reality. We're going to talk about how humans and this crazy new technology called virtual reality, turns out it actually isn't new, but in some ways it is new, especially from sort of a creativity perspective, right? Having these tools at our disposal that now anyone's able to create these sort of experiences in alternate realities. So first, what about you guys? Have you guys, I'd love to hear, how many here have tried VR before? Wow, that's a bigger number, larger proportion than last time. What type of VR? Like Google Cardboard? Everyone? Most everyone? What about the Gear VR? Any people? Have any of you tried, say, the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift? All right, any others? Which one?
the Oculus.
Oculus, and what else? Heard someone say something. What about augmented reality?
Void and Dreamscape.
Dreamscape what?
Void and Dreamscape.
Oh, the Void, yes. I haven't done the Star Wars experience. We just were in the Ghostbusters experience up in New York a month ago. That's awesome. What's that? Star VR, yes. Wide field of view, right? Absolutely. HoloLens, yes. Augmented reality. Very cool. Okay, and what about your guys' background? Are you sort of more creators, or who are developers, like software developers? And what about more of the creative types, say like filmmakers?
Come on.
Okay, I saw a hand go down. So what do you create?
I'm an artist.
An artist, okay. What about teachers or students? I know there's some students.
Hey,
here.
students, raise your hands.
And I'm sure there's some teachers here as well, right? And who have I missed? I'm sure I missed quite a few, but anyone? Okay, so given that so many of you have tried virtual reality in different ways, yeah, that might change the talk a bit. That's great. So we'll come back to this. These are some announcements from AT&T. We'll go through over the breaks. But my name is Jason Jeralds. I'm co-founder and principal consultant at a little company called Next Gen Interactions, and I'm also adjunct faculty at Duke University in North Carolina. And I've been very, very fortunate. I discovered virtual reality back in the mid-90s and just fell in love with it. I decided I was going to commit my life to that, for the better or for the worse. And to be honest, at times it seemed like for the worse, right? But it didn't matter because I just loved what I was doing. 15 years ago, it was tough to survive doing virtual reality. But I've been very fortunate to work with some great companies such as AT&T and in fact Hughes Research Laboratories just down the road, and several other great companies. And here's some example crazy projects, right, all the way from medical visualization and military applications to building crazy hardware, lots of fun different projects. And it's been a quite diverse experience, right? I've been able to work with a lot of sort of diverse fields, and that's what keeps it interesting. VR is very interdisciplinary, so I'm just constantly always learning, so I feel like I'm very fortunate. So this is what we're going to cover. So we're going to kind of split this in half. The first side is sort of what is virtual reality. Now you guys, a lot of you, most of you maybe, over half, have already tried virtual reality. So that's very important. Virtual reality, you have to experience it. I can sit here and talk all day long, but it wouldn't matter if you haven't tried it. So if you have not tried it, you definitely should get out there and try that as soon as possible. The second half, we'll talk more about the human side of virtual reality, right? How do we perceive reality? What are some of the health challenges? And also, how do we design around the human instead of designing around the technology? Okay, so let's go ahead and dig in. So, what is virtual reality? Boy, that's a tough question. You sort of get a different answer at every person you talk with. How I define it is that it's just a computer-generated digital environment, that is, it's controlled by the computer in some way, But for the human, for the user, you experience it as if that was environment, that computer-generated environment was real. Doesn't necessarily mean it's realistic. It just means that you're experiencing it in a way that you would sort of maybe imagine interacting with a cartoon, for example. You don't necessarily need photorealism, although in some cases you are going for photorealism. An example of that is this sort of game called Audio Shield, right? Where you're sort of interacting with these strangely shaded objects that are coming at you. That's not necessarily what you would experience in reality, but you're experiencing it as if those strange things were coming at you. And so here's an example of a lot of different systems with some of you said have tried the HTC Vive. So these are some of the things you can do with these sort of fully immersive environments. And so they do a great job here of kind of conveying the experience of what it's like if you're that music. Which was captured with that green screen. In some cases, like here, this is a little bit more sort of realistic than some of the other cartoons. It also allows you to do superhuman things, or fight zombies, right? That's not necessarily realistic, but it's experienced as realistic. Have any of you tried these? Any of these you've seen so far? Few of you? Very cool. And for the artists, art in VR is a completely different medium. It's just one of the most amazing things to go into a world and be able to just create in 3D space instead of being confined to that 2D screen. Okay, so someone mentioned they tried the HoloLens, so there's other forms of reality as well, right? There's augmented reality, there's mixed reality. What the heck do those things mean? Well, to be honest, I've kind of given up on defining those things because anytime you ask someone what mixed reality is, at least every time I ask, I get like a different answer, right? Everyone sort of has their own sort of vision of what mixed reality is. And augmented reality as well, right? Some people would consider this sort of magical window that you see on your phone without a head-mounted display, right? That's a form of augmented reality, but other people would say it's not. So I've kind of given up on what that is and just settled for the term XR, where X is choose your favorite word, right? Including, on the left here, this interesting thing called real reality, right? That's the inspiration for these other realities. Without that, then where would we be? All the way on the right is sort of that more fully immersive reality like you just saw in the previous video. Then in between are things like augmented reality and mixed reality, however you want to define that. So for example, this is the magic leap here. The idea is that you wear these glasses, they're just regular glasses, and you see the real world, but it also projects computer-generated images over what you're seeing. And so this big whale here isn't really in the gym, right? He's computer-generated, overlaid onto the real world that you're seeing here. R360 film. Right, what Derek Rowe talked about earlier, for those of you that were here, you're capturing that real world and then bringing it into virtual reality. Is that virtual reality? Is that augmented? It's sort of augmented reality, right? Because you're seeing the real world. It's just at a later time than when it was actually captured. So what the heck type of reality is that? I don't know. It's X reality, I guess. Okay, so I'd also like to point out that virtual reality is not new, right? I was saying initially that it is new from a creative perspective because now as creatives and artists, we can go in there and create these amazing experiences. That was not always the case. 15 years ago, it took 6 months just to get pixels up on the screen, right? But now we can do that literally in a day. It's amazing. And so it really allows us to experiment and be creative. Depending how you define that virtual reality, I defined it as a computer-generated digital environment. But it doesn't necessarily, you could also say, well, it doesn't need to be digitally created. It could be created in our minds, right? Just like any other medium, film, or all the way back back to the caveman days, right? It's sort of drawn, painting on the walls of the cave, right? That was a form of conveying an experience to another person, so that in their mind, at least, they were, sort of experiencing in a way those realities. All these other crazy devices going back to the 1800s. Some of these stereoscopes, for example, that's in a way sort of a experience as if you're somewhere else that you're experiencing as if it was real, right? So if you look through some of these old school 1800 stereoscopes, you'd have a different image for the left and right eye, and you'd have this sense of depth as if those were actual objects instead of just a flat screen you were looking at. So lots of crazy different things. We don't have time to go into all of those, but sort of one of my favorites here is on the lower far right is Tom Furness, who was creating these crazy head-mounted displays for the Air Force back in, I think this was 1968. So one of the first head-mounted displays. And that's important because we're going to come back later and discuss what he's doing now. He's really kind of looking at virtual reality. What can it take us at a higher level as a society? A lot of people try to think of these augmented and virtual realities as something that takes a head-mounted display. A head-mounted display